God instructed the prophet Ezekiel to prophesy something to the people. A prophet either speaks to the people about God's love and providence and how he's pleased with them, or he's going to tell them give them a warning that if they don't change their ways, they're going to be punished. Well, this was the problem there. Many of the people had fallen away from God's grace. They were not worshiping and doing as they should. And God told Ezekiel to warn them that they would die forever if they didn't reform. Well, they didn't want to hear it. Just like most of us, if someone tells us we're doing something wrong, we don't want to hear it. But God's trying to say that just as the prophet was told to give this warning to people, so we are all called to do that. In the church, we would call it brotherly, fraternal correction. If we know somebody who's doing something really wrong, we don't go out and tell everybody else in the world about it, but we go to that person and say to them, can I help? Is there something I can do to help you with what you're facing? That oftentimes is the thing that turns them around. Sometimes they'll just tell you to get lost, right? As a priest, that's happened to me many times. I go to a hospital room because the family called, and I walk in the door and say, priest, get out of here. I don't even want to see you or anybody from the church. I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I will pray for you. You don't have to pray for me, and you go away praying for the person because they're really hurting, really hurting. But it called to mind one time, I think I was a seminarian still, probably in my last year of formation, because we had to go around to all the different types of hospitals to visit patients. For example, the VA hospital, the mental hospital for the mentally ill, different types of hospitals and nursing homes and things like that where there were sick people. And one day we were going to the VA, I think it was in Brecksville, and the chaplain there assigned certain patients for us to go and just talk to because we were supposed to be practicing this pastoral work. Well, the one man that I went to see, he was probably about 23 or 24 years old. I think he was my age at the time. And he had been seriously injured in Vietnam. That's all I knew about him when I went to the room. But when I walked in, he did what I just said before. He said, are you a priest? I said, no, I'm studying to be one. Well, then get out of here. I want nothing to do with you or the church. And so I was stunned by his reaction, but I said to him, as I was turning around to leave, I turned back. His name was Tom. I said, Tom, you're pretty angry about something. If you ever want to talk about it to someone, I'll be available. So I started to leave again, and he said, no, wait, come back. And I sat down with him, and here he said he wasn't even sleeping at night because he said he was at near an orphanage when he was fighting in Vietnam, and there were many children there who were being mistreated, and no one was taking care of them. They didn't even have basic needs. They were all Vietnamese children. And he said their parents either were killed or abandoned them, whatever. But he said, where's the church? Why isn't the church over there helping them in that orphanage? And I said, well, maybe the church doesn't know that they're there. He said, oh, that's a nice excuse. But he said, if you're worth what you're saying to me about God loving everybody, then you'll do something about it. That's all I want to say. So I went home and I looked up who was the bishop who was in charge of Catholic Relief Services. He was in New York. And I called him. Amazingly, I got him on the phone. And I told him my encounter with this young man. And he said, can you find out exactly where he was? And I said, yes, I can. So I went back there and I talked to him and I said, I need to know exactly where this orphanage is. And he told me what division he was in and where he was and so forth. And I sent that off to the Archbishop. And they found it. They found the orphanage. The Archbishop called me back and he said the conditions were deplorable. He said it was so wonderful of that young man to tell us about these orphan children. He said, I want you to know that Catholic Relief Services is giving them everything that they need in terms of medicine and health and clothing and food, and even some missionaries to help them. I was so happy. I couldn't wait to go and tell him. And he was so happy. He was so happy. And I told him, I said, you know, I couldn't guarantee you that I could do anything, but I prayed about it, and I thought, I'll go where I think someone can help. And it worked out in God's grace that it worked. And I said, it's because of you. And then he just broke down, and he just shared with me all his feelings of anger and frustration and being injured in Vietnam and so forth. And I thought, well, by God's grace, the two of us came together, and he began receiving the sacraments again, and his life is turning around. I just share that with you because I thought of it for some reason when I read the gospel and the readings today, that we're called to correct others and to help them. Sometimes they refuse our help, but at least we can say, I'll pray for you. That's what Jesus says in the gospel. Pray for them. And if we do, that's going to have an effect. And God will provide an opportunity for them to heal of whatever they need to be healed of. And so today, we ask God to help us. The story I told is a bit dramatic one, but then there's the everyday story of people that we know that are angry or upset or hurting about something. Do we offer to just come and talk with them in a way that's not intruding, but a way that's just saying, I think you're upset, and if you want to talk or if I can help, I will. That's basically what God's saying in the gospel, that we need to reach out to people that we know that are in need of someone to listen and care. Many times I could not solve somebody's problems, but they would feel so much better just because they had someone listen to them that cared, that they were concerned about it. And so that's just a good Christian thing to do. It's what we should be doing as Christians. So it's a simple message tonight. Love one another as Jesus has loved us. And he's saying there's a lot of commandments, he says in the reading, but they all boil down to one thing, and that is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And if we follow those two commandments always, what a better world it would be.